geez.
We're super warmed up now that we've had some really controversial stuff that we can't put actually on the internet going on behind the
Where are we
scenes.
going?
Holy crap, it's Friday. We've been drinking. It's the Libertarian Moms, and we're back. Parenting Porcupines. Welcome to the show. All right, tonight's topic is gender inequality and the pay gap. And we did a ton of research for the show. Jessica did a ton of research for the show to get ready to talk about, number one, is gender inequality a thing in the workplace? Which I think we can all just go ahead and be like, well, yeah. And if you don't think it is, it's because you're probably living some patriarchal lie. And then the second piece of it is like, is this related to how much we're actually compensated for the work that we're doing? You can get all of the show notes out on the blog. This is season 4. We're back, ladies. How excited are you? I'm glad to see you. I'm glad to be back.
This is my favorite part of the week.
I love that. Is it the drinking or oh no, I'm just kidding. Okay, so let's so we send people out to the show notes. Let's get it started. Let's kick it off. First, Jessica, why are we even doing this topic? Tell the people about your visit with Mr. America.
Yeah, so I was on Jason Lyon's show over on Muddied Waters Media several months ago. It was in the fall, I guess, I think October. And we talked about empowering women. He's here in the upstate of South Carolina, which is where I am. And so we are constantly running into each other at events and things like that for the party, the Libertarian Party. And he was talking to me about some ideas for some episodes. And I said, I think it would be a really cool conversation if you did something on empowering women. And so he was like, yeah, you want to come on and talk about it? I was like, sure, why not? Even though I'm really not an expert in it, except that I have boobs, right? So like, but sure. So, we covered the general range of topics. We talked about feminism and what that looks like in terms of the traditional feminism versus modern feminism, like the woke feminism that we're seeing right now. And then we talked about, various other things. We touched on, women in the military. I think we talked about, we did talk about gender inequality in the workplace and those expectations. So it was a fun conversation. I'm not used to the hour-long format, but it was fun. I was glad to be there with him. But that kind of, I think led the way for us to have this more pointed conversation because we're all women and we all have careers, right, outside of politics and outside of our motherhood and wifedom. And so it's a conversation that I think a lot of people shy away from because it is a hard conversation to have. So I think it's important.
Yeah, I agree, because when we talk about gender inequality and we talk about the pay gap, there tends to be this sort of like us versus them. Women are demanding certain things, right? Like men feel like they're being accused of kinds of things. And I think, how do we remove that kind of animosity out of the conversation and just talk like real facts? Like, what are the actual facts? What does the data say? And does the data support this argument that women who hold the same jobs are being paid less for those same jobs? And so one of the things that we talked a little bit about last night as we were kind of prepping for the show was equal pay for equal work. And this is it's mantra? A cool thing. Yeah, it's a cool thing to put like on a protest sign. But like, Melissa, talk a little bit about that, like how the equal pay for equal work thing also feels a little bit like it's misleading.
It is misleading because you say there's a pay gap. Okay. And it's women make 84 cents on the dollar. I might be misquoted. It might be 87. I didn't write it down, but they make significantly less than men. But people look at that and think, oh, that's for the same job and the same experience and just the same position, but it's not. That's taking everything. That's all men's wages and all women's wages.
Yeah, so
and
it
that's
takes this
apples and oranges.
Yeah, it's a huge data set of all the men who
Yeah.
are working and all the women who are working, and it tries to bring it down to like hourly rate. And not a whole lot of people get paid for hourly rate. People work beyond their hours. And to your exact point, like it's about experience and that sort of thing. And you're
Yeah.
at the show notes
Even
out
in
on
my house. Yes.
parentingporcupines.com is where you can find the show notes, and it says 80 to 85 cents per dollar. So yeah, so talk about that. I'm sorry, I know I interrupted you. I just want to like
Oh,
direct
that's
people to
okay.
like where it
Yes.
actually is. So yeah,
The
talk a little bit
actual
more about
numbers.
that.
Well, because in my house, my husband and I make very close to the same hourly wage. He works 40 to 50 hours a week. I work 5 to 15 hours a week. So on paper, he makes a shit ton more than me. But our actual hourly wage is, we're within 10 cents of each other. And we have different jobs. I'm in IT. He runs a machine. But because I stay home with the kids, it's my job to get them to school. It's my job to get them, if they're sick from school, it's my job to take them to the doctor's office, because this is how we want our life structured.
So it's primary caregiver role, right? And in that primary caregiver role, you're missing hours from when you could be on the job, right? And so we've got at least one watcher, one viewer on YouTube. That's our moment where we're saying goodnight to the children. Good night, children. So we've got a couple of things, couple good points being made by Charluch. Number one, there's differences in industries and jobs, right? So we do know that there's different pay rates in different industries and different jobs. Knowledge work typically pays a little bit more. So if you're a software developer or you're a project manager of some kind, some of these more like sort of, like I said, knowledge jobs, as opposed to some of our more physical labor jobs like retail and that kind of thing. We see that from an industry and jobs. And we also see years of experience in terms of what your rate is going to be. And I want to come back to the years of experience conversation, because when women select caregiver, they lose years of experience. So
I was
when
out of
women
the
stay home
workforce
with their
for
children,
5 years.
yeah. In which case you've lost those years of experience while your male counterparts have surged past you because they did not choose, or they were not required to stay home with their children. And then the third thing brought up by our viewer is differences in hours worked. I think that's probably a matter of volume, right? So are you working a number of hours? And some of that's about
I
being
work
available.
part-time. Yep.
And if you're the available caregiver for your family, you can't work quite as many hours because those hours are dedicated to caregiving. And then the fourth one is discrimination. And here we are.
While we're here.
I'm not saying every man and woman are paid exactly the same for the same job. Like there's still issues, but it's not 84 cents on the dollar.
Right.
It's not that big. It's 5 cents difference.
Right.
Just
well, and I think too,
that's not an issue.
But let's clarify that real quick though, because you said that the hourly rate between you and your husband was within 10 cents. So if we say that women make 85 cents to a man's dollar, that's a 15-cent differential. So within 10 cents is still pretty close to that 15-cent differential that is like the industry average, right? So like we're not talking about it being a huge difference, but there's still a difference between, and it might in fact be that experience that he's been able to rack up versus what you have, and those years lost out of all these things that we've already talked about. But just to say that like the 10-cent difference, the 15-cent difference, like it's still there, it exists. Go ahead, Jessica. You're gonna
I was just going to say no, it's okay. I was going to say you also have to account for things like general performance and productivity, right? Because there could be an instance where you have a man and a woman with the same job title, and it may just be that the man does a better job and he makes more money, or the woman does a better job and she makes more money, or there could be factors that aren't even considered at all. For example, in what I do, it is very specific to the state of South Carolina. I have a male counterpart. Let's just use Georgia for an example, because that's a big operation. It's much bigger than my operation. It brings in more revenue. Therefore, it has higher profits. It's easier to work in Georgia doing what we do. So they have better margins than we do most of the time. And so, I mean, I don't know what he makes. It's really not my business. It's not my concern, but I would be surprised if he didn't make more than me. And it's not because he's a man, it's because of the market he's in, the profitability. And he lives in Atlanta. So, I mean, it's the cost of living is higher. And so I think that, when we have this conversation, a lot of times when we look at the general reports and the data, those are things that I don't think are accounted for. And so I would be curious to see a report that really digs into more of the specifics. And it's not to say that I think it doesn't exist, because I do. I know it does. I've experienced it. But, I do think that there are a lot of things that are considered in these statistics. But
I think you're right about that. And I think what's interesting about a report like this one, because we're referring to one that you can find out in the show notes. Let me put that blog website back up here real quick so you guys can get to it. But we're talking about, number one, a report that's 10 years old, right? And so what it's reporting on is a decade ago, right? And so things have definitely changed from then till now, but there are quite a few things in that report that are still super relevant, like the rate at which women are starting their own businesses, the amount of buying power that exists in the female earner in the household. And especially when we look at single parent households, single parent families, they are overwhelmingly female-led households, where the woman is the one who, and I'm not to say that we don't have male-led households, of course we do, but overwhelmingly we see these female-led households. So if you're in a situation where there isn't a partner to balance that caregiver role, then of course she's at a disadvantage by all those things that we just talked about, in the lack of time to be able to come in. And some of these things too, and this is maybe an archaic model, but we start thinking about all of the things that are not part of the job description, right? But that are part of office politics: coming in early, staying late, being part of happy hours, taking clients out for dinner, engaging out of town vendors, like all these kinds of things that traditionally we expect of sales personnel, for example, or even and travel. Like that's a big one. When the career that I had as a consultant, I traveled 2 weeks out of the month. If I hadn't had a partner that was able to care for our child, how was I going to do that? Like, how was I going to even take a job where I traveled 2 weeks out of the month if I didn't have somebody here to get Holly up and get her to school and this kind of thing? So some of these careers too, because of caregiver responsibilities, put women out of the contention altogether. You can't even take that job because of the requirements that you have as a caregiver to your family. So that, I think, is something that's not measured by some of the statistics that we see. When we look at gender inequality, sometimes opportunities just aren't even available because the family responsibilities are such that that job is not conducive to
just
a
like
female
working on an
employee.
oil rig. They make a I'm going to swear, shit ton of money because it's a horrible job and no one wants to do it. I couldn't do it. I can't be gone for 6 months at a time. That's not an option.
Right. And nobody is suggesting, so don't go all ballistic in the comments. Nobody is suggesting that men choose to leave their families for 6 months at a time. Don't be dicks about this. What we're saying is that the can versus the will, right? Like can you leave?
No. Okay, so I have a friend whose husband works for a contractor, and he has worked in Afghanistan for the past however many years. He is gone he comes home for a couple months a year.
Mm-hmm.
He makes a shit ton, like a double shit ton of money to do this. And they talked about it and made the choice. If you do this for 4 years, we're debt free. We own our house free and clear. You can come home and work whatever job you want. And they've decided to make that sacrifice. And it's not like he's like, oh, screw my family, I'm going here. But
it's an investment. It's a particular kind of investment, because we have friends whose husbands are military, have been deployed, and when they come back and they've missed a full year, right? They missed all these milestones. They missed these things, and there's an emotional toll that something like that takes. And the payoff, the financial payoff is this worth it? And as partners, you make that, you have that conversation. But I think we're thinking of it from an employer perspective when we talk about like inequality and the gender pay gap, what does an employer get from lowballing a female employee? So say, for example, you have this role, you're moving into this role. The person before you has vacated this role, right? They were there, he was there 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, who knows, right? He was there ahead of you and was making more. Employers typically have a salary band, and they say like you can either be on the low end or the high end of the salary band, and the considerations of like where do you fall in the salary band sometimes are these unintended gender discrimination things, right? And some of it might be how long you've been in the role. If you come in here at the entry level, we'll slowly promote you back up to where that guy was. But like Jessica, talk a little bit about the idea that maybe you were a better candidate when you came in than he was when he came in. So why should you have to come in at the same starting salary that he came in? Like, how do we value the work? How do we really think about what is the work worth?
I'm probably not the best person to do that.
No?
Because I came in higher than my predecessor in my position. So
Well, no,
I
that's a
don't,
great thing
yeah,
then.
like
How'd you
I
do
don't,
that?
I don't have, I don't,
Tips,
fortunately, I don't have that experience. My experience was more along the lines of working for a company. This was several years ago. And I worked in the legal department. It was just myself and the attorney, and super nice guy, but never around, like hardly ever. And I pulled all the weight, like almost all of the weight. And the job that I was doing was not the job that I was titled or salaried for. And so I spent quite a bit of time doing market research, and I put together a like a summary of my responsibilities and what I thought the appropriate title would be based on my research. And it was actually, I think I put like 3 or 4 different, like similar job titles, right? And then a salary, like a range, like an average range salary for that position in our market. And I was told that that was not going to happen because they were not giving out promotions. The 6 months following that conversation, there were guys who were in different departments within the company, but doing similar jobs within those departments who were promoted ahead of me. There were 3 of them. And that's when I realized that I had become, I hate this word, but I had become a victim of that discrimination. And this was in an industry that is driven by men. And I talked to some folks within the company, and they had the same kind of experience. They were a little bit more stuck, I guess, than I was, just because of their experience. So I say they were stuck. They felt a little bit more glued to their position there than I did, but I left. I wrote a scathing letter of recommendation or resignation, and I burned that bridge to the damn ground. And I left with a bonus in hand.
It's also called hush money. In some circles, they call it a bonus. In others, they call it hush money.
That's what it was. But I mean, that's, that was my experience. But that was also my experience of removing myself from that situation. And it ended up putting me on a different trajectory. The next job was a higher salary. The next job was a higher salary. And then, so on and so forth. And then I ended up where I am.
Though, because one of the things that we were like transitioning into this conversation about, like, what do we do about it, right? And how do we talk to our kids about it and that kind of thing? So what do we do about it?
Teach them how to do that right there.
Yeah. So I was going to say, so we've been
figure out their
talking
worth,
about
know their worth, and demand that they be.
That's exactly right.
Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to walk away. I mean, that's what we tell our kids.
It's just a job. There's a million of them. Find another one.
So at the parent level, right? Like we talk about teaching our kids to know their value, know their worth, understand how to negotiate, right? But even at the Moore School, at the University of South Carolina, like even in the career center, they're specifically talking to women about how to negotiate salary, how to recognize what the right salary is. And when you're
Mhm.
offered a specific salary, don't just take it.
Hmm.
Say to them, like, I think this is, here's what I think is a fair salary, or here's where, what my research shows a fair salary, and force them to justify paying you a lower salary. And so I don't think it's wrong to say, like, here's my salary that I prefer, and them to go, well, we can't afford that, but here's, what we're
We'll
willing to
meet you
offer
here.
instead. Exactly.
Yeah,
Like
it's a
there,
discussion.
it's a
Yeah.
discussion, but that
Mhm.
idea of know your worth, know your value, and then do the research, come in armed with, this is data that supports my assertion here.
Mhm.
The flip of that is that we see statistics that tell us that men are more likely to negotiate a higher salary. And sometimes that negotiation does not come from competence in terms of, like, I have this amount of experience, I have these skills, but simply confidence to say, I think I'm worth this.
Hmm.
So, how do you talk your female charges into being like, just go in there and tell them you're worth more than they think you are?
So I think this is a situation where it's really good to surround yourself with other women who have this experience, right? And networking with other people who are
Mentorship. Mentorship is
working
awesome.
toward the same goals, right?
Mhm.
I have a friend who I met through one of my prior jobs. Her name is Melissa, and she's absolutely incredible. And I have to give her so much credit for who I am today, because a lot of what I have accomplished has been because of her guidance and her counsel, because I can go to her with anything and she doesn't tell me what I should do. She talks me through how to proceed. Like, what is it that you're trying to accomplish? Okay, so what should you do next to get to this point? And then what should you do? And so I think a lot of anytime I'm faced with any sort of decision or negotiation, I always kind of go back to our conversations and how do I think she would handle this, because she's such a great businesswoman. Um, and so I think having that relationship with someone else who can kind of guide you and empower you, and counsel you, I think that's important. And I think it has to be, women looking out for each other.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. We talk a lot about that as mentor experience, right? Being able to
Hmm.
connect with a mentor. And then last week, I was at this Women Who Lead event at the Moore School, and the woman who gave the keynote said, as you are climbing the ladder, you use one hand for the climb and the other hand to pull the
To
woman
pull people
behind
up.
you
Hmm.
up behind you, and say to them, this is how I did it. These are the mistakes I made, and these are the
Hmm.
things I was able to do successfully, and then put them forward for positions. And I will say, because since it's a gender inequality conversation, the people who have put me forward more often than not have been men who saw my potential, saw my skills, that thought that I would be of value to their organization, and have said, you need to come work for me. What do I have to do
Hmm.
to get you in my office? How can I make sure that you're teaching at my school? Right? Like, you're super valuable. What can I do to make sure you stay here? Like, there have been men that have recognized my talent and have said, let's put you forward for this position.
Hmm.
Um, and it's interesting when those men decide to advocate for you, what that influence looks like, right? Whether or not, and how it's received by the other people around you. Like, how did this person decide to give you that favor, and those kinds of things too. I haven't been, fortunately, embroiled in like any like real major corporate scandals, but there are politics in every work environment, and there is a, like, who you align yourself with. And I don't know how to remove that from the environment, other than to say, like, I'm just going to put my head down and do good work. And I'm going to continue to impress the people that I think are the ones I need to impress. Right. I had a really good boss one time that told me to stop looking for where I wanted to go and start doing a really good job where I'm at. bloom where I'm planted, to use Dabo's phrase, right? Like, and if I'm doing a fantastic job at what I'm doing, people are going to notice that you're knocking it out of the park where you're at. So,
Well, and I tell my employees, don't worry about what other people are doing. Focus on what you're doing, because that's what's important, right? Because if someone else is not doing something properly, it's gonna be seen, right? It's gonna be seen. It's gonna be noticed. But if you're doing everything right, it is seen. You may not get praise every day. You're not going to get praise. Newsflash for those of you watching this: you are not going to get praise every day for doing your job. But it's if you're going above and beyond, people are going to notice.
Yeah.
But I think it's also important as part of this conversation that you understand the importance of recognizing your goals. And it's great to focus on where you are and working hard where you are, doing your best, learning as much as you can where you are. But it's never a bad thing to look forward and to know where you want to go. And it's never a bad thing to communicate that, because there are
tell
a lot of
everyone you can where you want to be.
And
there's lots of different ways to get there.
I tell my employees that all the time. If there is a goal that you have, if there is an opportunity that you want, if you tell me what that is, we will map that out all day long. We will map it out and I will get you there. It might take a little while. It doesn't happen overnight, but I'll get you there. And I think a lot of bosses do feel that way. I think you just have to be willing to go to them and say, hey, these are my goals. This is the opportunity I'm looking for. Can you help me get there? Let's talk about what this path looks like. And if there's not a path, how do we make one?
Well, so let's be realistic about this, right? I think there are a lot of bosses that want to do whatever they can to help you, right? Like I do think that's true. I'm that boss. Like I'm the one that's like, how can I help you be successful? How can I help you achieve these things? Well, like I think that's true. I do also think there are a lot of bosses that are fully threatened by people who can do things that they cannot do, and that will shut that shit down as fast as they possibly can. And so understanding the difference, or recognizing the difference between those two people, and determining, like, is this person in my corner? Are they going to help me? Or is this somebody that's going to sabotage me and I should look out? The only way to... Oh, go ahead, Melissa, go ahead.
I was going to say, and knowing when you can get around if they're going to stand in your way, if you can get around them, or if you need to leave and go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Because if you can't get around them, leave. Find somewhere else.
But the only way you know the difference between the two is if you lay it on the table, right? Like if you say, this is what I want,
tell people what you want,
and your boss responds to you in a particular way. Because if you're sort of like subversive about it and like, I'm going to maybe try this or maybe try that, then the boss is going to think that you're undermining them. And if they're one of those paranoid bosses, they're going to fist you, right? Like, boom, you're down. We're done with you. Like, boom, right? But if you are, so I was really lucky to have the second kind of boss that was like, hey, you're a really ambitious person. So I know that what you're doing here is not the end for you. So let's talk about how this can be your next step, and then what your steps beyond that can look like. And growing her people was really important to her. But she laid it on the table because she said to me, an employee's number one job is to make their manager look good. And if you make your manager look good, your manager will help you get where you need to go. So if all I'm doing is subverting her and complaining about her and bitching about her and acting against her wishes and these kinds of things, I'm not helping her. She's not going to be willing to help me either.
A rising tide lifts all ships.
Exactly. So she looked right at me and she's like, I know you're ambitious. I know you got a lot of things you want to do. If you help me, I will help you. But if you work against me, we're not going to have a very good relationship here. And I thought that was super cool for her to be upfront with me right off the bat. But not a lot of people are that transparent. And so it can be difficult to figure out, like, what kind of manager am I dealing with here? Is it somebody who wants to help me and see me succeed? Or is it somebody who's threatened by me and worries that I'll take their job? And I don't know the like right question. I don't I don't know how to tell the difference. I'll be honest with you.
Well, I
In
think
20
you can
years in
look
the
at
workforce, and
turnover.
I've just
So yeah, it's always been like a gut feeling for me.
I
I
always ask, well, I say always, I haven't interviewed for a job in a long time. I used to go to job interviews for fun because I am a weirdo, y'all.
You
Like
are absolutely.
I would send out that resume and I would go to job
Ugh.
interviews. I didn't even care if I got an offer. I just like to stay fresh, like just in case, right? Because you never know when the opportunity might come up. I haven't been on a job interview in
We
forever,
have
but
nothing in common, Jessica.
It's the worst.
It
It's the
is the
worst.
worst.
Like, there's not a lot of things that are worse than job interviews, but like, I'll put up, I don't know,
I
like
don't
dental
know.
appointments and shit like that. Like, there's some other things that suck worse than job interviews, but not very many.
I like going to the dentist too, though. Anyway, so, but one of the things that I
Freak.
always
Total
ask,
freak.
totally I'm a weirdo. One of the things I always ask is, what is your turnover rate? Because whoever I'm working for, the turnover rate is telling me a lot about their
It's
leadership. Because if you
absolutely true.
have a high turnover rate, I mean, you might as well just plant a red flag right there on their desk, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
But
if
if you
they're
have
saying things like it's low, then your next question should be, what's the
how low,
average tenure of the people that work for
Mhm.
you? How long have they
Yeah.
been here?
Yep. Yep.
You know? Yeah.
So, I mean,
Dig a
it's
little deeper. What's your
yeah.
turnover rate? They're like, oh, it's very, very low. Sure it is. How long have people been working here? Well,
Yeah.
this person has been here for
1 year.
17 years.
Yeah.
Why has that person been working for you for 17 years and not advanced in this company?
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. Exactly.
All right,
And I
cool.
think you do have to keep in mind too, sorry, because on that topic, I think
No,
it's
you're fine.
only fair to say, I think you also have to keep in mind, if you ask a question like that, there are going to be people who aren't there for very long, because there are going to be people who don't work out for, any number of reasons. So you have
Whatever.
to be
Yeah.
prepared for that too. But I think the longest employee, right? Like, how long has the longest employee been working here?
Mhm.
How long has the next, or the least tenured employee been working here? I think those are good questions to ask, because I think that gives you a pretty good reading on the temperature of
So
the
I'm
culture.
an advantage because I work in academia, where typically if you're hired into a role in academia, you are
You're there
interviewed by
forever.
well, yeah, but you're interviewed by a panel of other
Mhm.
professors who you get to ask them directly. How long have you been in the department? Why did
Mhm.
you stay with the department? Like, you get to ask them versus like most interviews where it's just you and the hiring manager. And so you may not have transparency to those kinds of things. So I would say tell the truth in your job interview about who you are and what you want and what you're willing to put up with and what you're not willing to put up with.
Mhm.
Because if they hire the person that you think they want to hire, but that's not you, if you're putting on a front,
Mm-mm.
then you're going to be
It's
unhappy
not worth
Yes.
it.
and you're
It
going to
is so
leave
Yes.
not worth it.
or they're going to
Yep.
fire you. So just tell the truth. And if you don't get the
Mhm.
job, you don't get the job because you're not the right fit. It's not
And
a
even if they
failure.
offer you a job, you don't have to take it.
Yeah. And it's not a failure on your part to say, like, this is not the right fit for me, or for them to say, you're not the right fit for us. And we've got to like kind of remove that stigma of like, if you don't get the job, you didn't win, you suck. It's not that. It's that you're just not the right fit. And this is a good thing because it means you
Yeah.
can go and find the place where you will be the right
Every
fit.
company has a culture, and
Mhm.
their culture might suck for you,
Yeah.
and you don't want to live there.
Let's be honest, their
It's true.
culture
You
probably
spend
does suck.
40 hours a week at that office
Yeah.
At
or at
least.
that place of business, at least.
Yeah. You don't
If
want to
it,
commit to something like that.
if you don't like their culture, if you don't like the people you're working with, it doesn't matter how much they pay you. It sucks, and you're going to be miserable.
And it's
Do
really
something
hard,
else.
I think, for when we talked about earlier, we talked about women being able to advocate for themselves. Sometimes, especially for young women, it's really difficult to get into that situation when the goal is to get the job. and to be honest with yourself about whether or not this is the right job for you. And I would say that the key, of course, is to be yourself, but then to be brave enough to say, I don't think this is the right fit. And even though I'm desperate to have a job, the best thing for me to do is to wait for the right one to come along. We've been talking about gender inequality and the pay gap. You know, you can get the show notes out on the blog. It's parentingporcupines.com. Season 4, we're in. We're doing this.
We did it.
I'm so glad to see you guys. I'm so glad we're back. The South Carolina Libertarian Party has our state meeting on the first Saturday of every month.
That's
at
tomorrow.
Beef O'Brady's. It is tomorrow. At Beef O'Brady's on Hardscrabble Road. If you're in South Carolina, you've been curious about the LP, come join us out at Beef O'Brady's tomorrow. We will be there at 12 o'clock noon. Thank you, ladies. We'll see you guys next time on Parenting Porcupines.
Bye, everybody.